It is September and the time has come to make the New York City Frocktails dress. New York City Frocktails is just over 2 weeks away, and as usual, I'm leaving things to the last minute-ish because that's just how things work out, but I do have a plan. I debated for a while about what I actually wanted to do for Frocktails, and my style is kind of not fitted. I prefer at this stage in my life things to be a little bit loose. I also really like trapeze style dresses. And now that I think about it, of the 3 New York City Frogtails that have taken place, I have worn a trapeze style dress to 2 of them, and both have been knits. But this one is not a knit. This one is actually 2 pieces. So I have made a slip, which is back there hanging until I have finished the outer dress so that I can hem them both together. And that is in a satinish kind of fabric. And then the outer dress is going to be in lace. For obvious reasons, lace can't be the only fabric. And so my plan came to be because I was inspired by this one dress that I saw on Instagram. It was also made by somebody, by a sewist, and I was enamored with the idea, and I really loved the way that the sort of sheer outer dress contrasted with the fabric underneath. In the parts that there was fabric underneath, she was also wearing a slip, but in the neckline she did not have the slip, so you could see the skin through the lace and then also through the hem. So here is what the fabric looks like, one on top of the other. And so this here is what it will look like once it is on, except for the hem and then the bit at the neckline that will look sheer. And for this project, I have chosen 2 separate patterns. The first one is the Avola dress from the Cashmerette club. Again, this is a club pattern, so you either have to have already been a member of the club when it came out, or if you buy the all access, then you can get the back month patterns. Otherwise, you can't get it. And that slip I made in a size 16, the shoulders and bust, and then I graded it out a little bit to the 18th at the waist, and the fit is so great. And as I said, I haven't hemmed it. It's here. I haven't hemmed it because I don't know how long the 2 pieces are gonna be once they are on together. And for the outer dress, I am using Vogue 1723, but I am making a few adjustments. First and most importantly, I am not cutting the front in 2 pieces like the pattern has. The pattern is supposed to be shaped at the front, but because I am working with sheer fabric and I don't want to interrupt that flow, I am cutting the center on the fold. And I'm doing that by lining up the center front stitch line at the neckline and at the hem with the fold of the fabric, and that will give me one clean line at the front. I am also not using the sleeve stays, which this dress has for the sleeves, because my fabric is sheer and I want the sleeves to remain sheer. What I'm going to do is do a channel for elastic at the hem of the outer sleeve and leave that as is, so no sleeve stay. So I'm working with the short version of the dress, and I am going to add 5 inches to the length of that in total, but I have also added 1.5 inches at the center front to make it, I guess, a little bit longer there, because I'm not doing a full bust adjustment because of the way that this dress is drafted, and because of the nature of full bust adjustments, I will just end up with way too much fabric at the hem. So to accommodate for that, I am just doing a slapdash adjustment to the center front. So the center front of the dress is about 6.5 inches longer than the original, but once it's on, it should all be level. Going back to the construction of the slip, I made it from this like really slippery satin, polyester satin fabric, and it was so hard to sew with, especially at the darts that you can see here. But all is well that ends well, and the dress turned out great. I don't know that I would wear it by itself, but it is fine as an underdress. Now this pattern piece is the front of the exterior dress. This is the Vogue pattern, and here I'm adding the 1.5 inches at the center front that I said I was doing for the full bust adjustment, tapering to nothing, about 3/4 of the way to the side seam. And now I'm just screwing it, making sure that nothing sticks out or any kind of weird angle, that everything flows nicely. And I'm doing it in green so that I don't confuse it with my next step. When I'm adding the extra length that I talked about, so I'm adding 5 inches all the way around from the green line all the way to the side seams. In the original pattern, the stays for the sleeves take up some of the length to create the poof, but because I wasn't using the sleeve stays, I had to shorten my sleeves a bit. I shortened them 1.25 inches, which you can see me doing here. And this is pretty straightforward. I just did it parallel to the grain line and just taped everything together. And once I had it all taped up, I just trued the side seams so that, you know, they wouldn't be all jagged and weird, because you can't sew that. Did the same thing on the other side, and my sleeves were ready to sew. And then it was time to cut the pattern pieces for the outer dress. This is the front pattern piece, and as I said earlier, I am lining up the stitch line on the neckline and the hem to eliminate that 1/2 inch seam allowance, so that then my piece is cut on the fold. And this is the back that is still shaped, that is not cut on the fold, because it needs to curve to the curve of the back of your spine. I sewed my side seams on the serger, which means that I finished the seam and sewed the seam together all at once, and I felt like that was the best choice for sheer fabrics. But for the center back seam, because there is a slit at the neck that you can see here for my head to get through, I just sewed that seam on the sewing machine, and then I used my rotary cutter, which is a pinking rotary cutter, to cut some of the seam allowance away. That way it will look neater and not ravel later on. I've been thinking about how I want to actually finish the neckline, because I didn't want to interrupt that illusion of the sheerness of the fabric. But I have concluded that there is just no way around avoiding that, at least with the materials that I have. So what I decided to do is finish the neckline with bias binding from the made from the fabric of the slip, which I've cut here, and that is going to neatly finish the neckline of the sheer exterior dress. Now, because I'm doing the neckline binding instead of what they had originally done in the pattern, which is lined obviously doesn't work for me. I went ahead and I removed I removed 3/8 of an inch from the neckline, because the original seam allowance was 5/8. So if I remove 3/8, then I am left with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and that is what I want when I'm working with bias binding. And in fact, that is actually what I want in necklines, period. 1/4, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance max. When you get to like 1/2 inch and 5/8, it is impossible to sew it neatly in a circle that tight. And I think that pattern companies that do that for the sake of simplicity, meaning for the sake of having the same seam allowance throughout in their pattern, actually do their customers a disservice. For the love of everything, please give us 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch seam allowances at the neckline. What I haven't decided yet is whether I want the shiny side of the binding to show through the neckline, or whether I want the dull side. I think I'm actually gonna go with the shiny side showing through. That way it matches the look of the dress over the slip, because the shiny side is the exterior of the slip. So now I'm just going to go ahead and press this in half and then attach it. And to actually close the neckline, because it is open at the back, I am going to sew hooks and eyes. So 1 hook and eye at the top once I have done the binding and secured everything in place. Actually, I have just had a thought. If I attach the binding to the outside of the neckline like this and then fold it in, I will actually be able to see the seam allowance. I know this doesn't make sense here now, but I will actually be able to see the seam allowance from the outside, and I don't want that. So I think what I'm going to do is actually attach the binding to the inside and then fold to the outside. And then I will have a band of the slip fabric on the exterior of my neckline. But I think overall that might actually look better, because then you won't be able to see the seam allowance through the lace or through the mesh, which is what this is. And this is where the saga of the neckline and finishing the neckline starts, as you'll see. Actually, I changed my mind. I'm attaching the binding to the outside and then folding it to the inside. I think overall that's just going to be neater. So I went ahead and I sewed the binding to the neckline from the outside to fold in, and then I trimmed the seam allowance a little bit so that when I folded the binding inside, the binding would cover the seam allowance. And that was that. My neck binding was done and we lived happily ever after. No, that was not done. Just kidding. Just kidding. Right. So I did that. I attached the binding and I actually hate it. My initial gut feeling was right. It just looks terrible from the outside. So I am going to put this in timeout for a little bit and try to decide how I want to move forwards. Because the problem with having the facing on the outside is that, because obviously it's under bias, and because it's so slippery, the fabric is so slippery, when I folded it and I pressed it, the width changes from, ever so slightly, but it changes enough on the length of the tape that to me, it was obvious. So I'm going to have to rethink how I'm going to go about this whole neckline situation. And while the neckline was on timeout, I went ahead and I started working on the sleeves. By this point, I had obviously already sewn the side seams. And so here I am gathering the sleeves to the body. I had run 2 lines of gathering stitches on the sleeve cap. And remember that I said that I wasn't using the sleeve stays. So after I gathered the sleeves to the body of the dress and I sewed them on, I went ahead and I sewed a casing for the elastic by folding up a 1/2 inch from the hem. And ideally, you would have a casing that is folded once and then folded again. But because this fabric had all these knobby flowers, I didn't want to make the actual casing too bulky, because then it would just not look right. And I also didn't want it to like bunch up too much on my arms. And yeah, and after the casing was done, here is what the sleeves look like before I added the elastic. The sleeves still need to have the elastic put through them, and then the space that I left open to put the elastic in sewn shut. But I'm going to leave that until after I finish assembling the dress. And the last thing standing between me and a finished dress is, well, first the hem, which is really just leveling it, and then the collar. And I have been thinking about this a lot, and I have decided that despite my original plan to not have the necktie, so the sort of the neck band and then ties in the back that are part of the pattern, that is actually the only way I'm going to be able to cleanly finish this neckline with a sheer fabric. So I have gone ahead and traced the pattern. I decided that I did not actually want the neck band and the ties to be the full width, so I removed a total of 3 inches, so 2.5 from each side, because they're cut in the they're cut in one piece and then folded in half. So they are going to be half as tall for the neckband and half as wide for the ties as they normally should be. And I am going to go ahead and cut the binding that I had already sewn to my neckline off and attach this. This is going to make my neckline a little bit wider because I've essentially eliminated the seam allowance in the actual neckline of the dress. But I think that'll be okay because you still have the height of that necktie. I don't think they call it a necktie. But what exactly does the pattern call it? The pattern calls it a collar. So the collar is still going to make it so that the neckline is fine. And at this point, this is really my only option. So if this doesn't work, I am scrapping this whole project and I'm wearing an old dress of Frocktails. I am actually going to sew the collar a little bit different to what the instructions say. The instructions have you only sew the collar to the neckline of the dress until about just past the shoulder seam, and then this end here is free. But I am actually going to sew it all the way to the edge just for practicality, and because it would just make it easier for me to sew on the serger, which is what I'm doing, if I can just end with a clean edge. And also because I think this way is a little bit silly. I sewed the collar in and wow, it looks so much better. Crisis totally averted. Look at how cute it ties up with a bow in the back, and it does the job of both finishing my neckline neatly and also serving as my button that I didn't actually have to add. And adding buttons or hooks and eyes on sheer fabric is not fun. So yay for ingenuity, which I guess in this case means just doing what the damn pattern said to do. And the last step in construction was to put the elastic through the sleeves, which is what I'm doing here. And I did that with just a little safety pin put onto the elastic. I'm using 1/4 inch elastic. And as I said earlier, my casing is 1/2 inch, which means that with so much fabric gathering around the elastic, there should be plenty of space for all of that to happen without the elastic either being folded on itself or anything weird like that. So just poking it out through the other end, and then I'm gonna go ahead and sew the elastic together, then sew the hole that is left in the hem. It's not actually a hole, it's just a space to put the elastic through, and then it will be time to hem the dresses. And it's not actually hemming. I am hemming the slip, but I am not hemming the outside dress. The hem is just left raw, and I did not actually film the hemming step. Mea culpa. At that point, I was extremely frustrated and I just wanted to be done. It has come time to hem, and I have marked the hem for the lace dress that I just took off at 15 inches off the ground, and for the slip, you can see here, at 17.5 inches off the ground, so that there is a little bit of the see-through of the lace at the hem, and it's almost done. So once I actually mark the hem properly, I'm gonna go ahead and finish it. And that is really as far as I got in terms of recording. I wasn't actually running out of time, but I was kind of frustrated with the project by that point. And then I went to Frocktails, and I actually don't even have good pictures of the dress or the outfit, the dresses, let alone actual video. I do have these 2 pictures that do show the dress in a very positive way, which is actually how I see it. I do love how it turned out, and I got so many compliments at Frocktails. So even though it was a frustrating process at times, especially with the neckline, I'm glad that I persevered, and in the end, I think having the collar and the little necktie made the whole thing better than what I had imagined in my mind. And yeah, so that is the 2024 Frocktails. This is obviously no longer 2024, it is 2025. I have been dragging my feet with this video because I had a lot of footage, and it was such a long time ago that I actually couldn't remember what the heck was going through my mind when I was filming. But it is now out in the world, and if you have any questions about either one of these patterns, this is the Avola dress from Cashmerette Club and Vogue 1723, I would be happy to answer. Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye.